call this meeting to order. This is the Delaware-Muncie Metropolitan Plan Commission meeting. It's our April 2021 regular monthly meeting. Let's open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Marty, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Borchers, Ms. Carey,
Here.
Mr. Dishman,
Present.
Mr. Hall,
Here.
Mr. Henry,
Here.
Mrs. Hensley,
Here.
Mr. Landis,
Here.
Mr. Matzenbacher,
Here.
Ms. Seib,
Here.
Mr. Stevens Hotop,
Here.
Ms. Teamy,
Here.
Mr. Wisely.
Here.
Very good, thank you. Consideration of the minutes, March 4th, 2021 regular monthly meeting. Entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion to approve in a second. Roll call, please.
Ms. Carey,
Yes.
Mr. Dishman,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Ms. Hensley,
Abstain.
Mr. Landis,
Yes.
Mr. Matzenbacher,
Yes.
Ms. Seib,
Yes.
Mr. Wisely,
Yes.
Mr. Henry.
Abstain. Okay, we'll go to unfinished business, MPC 01-21Z, and also MPC 02-21Z. Marta?
Yes, and for those of you who were at the last meeting, you will recall that we did consideration of both of these cases at the same time, so I will read them together, and as before, we would do separate votes by the commission once all of the input is concluded. So, MPC 01-21Z, Jurisdiction County Commissioners, being a public hearing on the matter of an application filed by Fountain Square Ministries Incorporated, 4405 South Madison Street, Muncie, Indiana, requesting a change in zone from the F farming zone to the IL Limited Industrial Zone on premises located on the west side of the 5400 block of South Cowan Road, Muncie, Indiana, as more accurately described in the application, and MPC 02-21Z, Jurisdiction County Commissioners, being a public hearing on the matter of an application filed by GV Farms LLC, 1810 Fountain Lane, Pendleton, Indiana, requesting a change in zone from the F farming zone to the IL Limited Industrial Zone on premises located at 2451 West Fuson Road, Muncie, Indiana, as more accurately described in the application.
Very good. So we'll start out with the applicant, or Ms. Lutton. Are you speaking for the applicants?
I think we're still expecting Pastor Graves to arrive, and Glenn Cleland had booked a ticket to come here and have rotator cuff surgery and found that he was unable to travel, so he did provide a letter to the planning commission. So Marta, maybe would this be an appropriate time to share that?
I can do that. And you also have a copy in front of you for the members. So this was received from Mr. Cleland, and it states, I watched the YouTube video from the last meeting of the Planning Commission. I totally understand the concerns of the residents. I also understand that the request will not allow an Exide-type operation to be built there. I spent the bulk of my life as a Muncie area resident, so the area has been dear to my heart. Having a business there for 40 years gives me a unique understanding of the needs of the jobs community and how it plays into the overall success of the area. That being said, I purchased the farm in 2008 or so as an investment. It is choice property for rezoning and a prime spot to attract good paying jobs if the opportunity arises. It is by far the best use for the property to benefit the community as a whole, and I recognize that. Countless families can benefit if the right organization develops this property. Our whole community benefits, and this could possibly jumpstart Muncie towards positive growth and increase our tax base. I don't know who is interested in the property, but I do know Muncie needs economic development so that our population can share in the prosperity of this country. I also know through my own experience at site selection for my operations at Magnatech that companies want to keep things very close to the cuff for competitive reasons. I want to see Muncie grow, prosper, and the residents have good paying jobs. I also want to see something go there that is an asset to our community, not an eyesore, and I have faith in the new leadership in the community to make sure that happens. If I can contribute to that, irregardless of my personal wishes, I feel obligated to the people in the community to help provide them with great job opportunities to support their families and achieve their dreams. And as stated, that is from Glenn E. Cleland, who is the owner of GB Farms LLC.
Very good. Tracy?
Well, Mr. Graves might be stuck downstairs, I'm not certain, but I could just possibly reiterate the comments that he shared at the last meeting. I don't wanna put words in his mouth, but his motivation that he shared for selling this property or having an interest in development is that he would like to use the proceeds from that sale to further the ministries of the Fountain Square Church. And he was quite impassioned about what they would like to do with those funds. And I think that was the essence of his motivation for the rezone. He sees that it brings further potential for them to sell that property. It's the only property they own outside of their actual church.
Very good. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this?
Good evening to the Planning Commission. I appreciate you taking time to hear folks speak in favor. My name is Stephen Brannon, and I'm going to speak in multiple capacities this evening. First and foremost, I'm going to speak as a neighbor. I work at Magna Powertrain. I'm the general manager there. And a letter was sent to Granite Real Estate. They are the ones that actually own the real estate. I forwarded the letter on to Granite and did not hear a response back for or against. And as a tenant, we are not opposed to the rezoning. That's the first capacity. The second capacity I'm going to speak from this evening, I'm on the board of the Chamber of Commerce of Muncie and Delaware County. I've also been on the DAC board, and I also serve on multiple other boards here in the community. And I can tell you from an economic development perspective, it's nice to have land that is ready to accept a potential tenant. Speed to market is important, and for our economic development folks to have a tool like this in their toolbox. And as Mr. Cleveland so eloquently pointed out in his letter, it's a prime location for the right type of use. And I was here at the last meeting, I didn't speak, but I heard the concerns of people, and I have the very same concerns about a heavy industrial type. And I believe that the limited industrial is a reasonable solution and use for that property. So from an economic development standpoint, I also speak in favor of that tonight. My third capacity, I'm currently the board president of the Muncie Sanitary District. And we process wastewater that comes from the entire city, as well as some communities outside of the city limits. Cowan Community Schools and some of the Cowan neighborhood is one of those areas. And this zoning that's being proposed, which is limited industrial, is something that the sanitary district would prefer. We wouldn't have, typically we wouldn't have a heavy requirement for pre-treatment, and they're a lot more friendly environmentally to our wastewater treatment plant, which we have just stuck, tens and tens of millions of dollars into. So from the Muncie Sanitary District perspective, we would be in favor of the zoning type of limited industrial. The fourth capacity is I'm a lifelong resident of Delaware County. I've lived here for 52 years. Township, which is just south of the site. I drive past this site 4, 5, 6 times a day. And it's important to me that we don't end up with, a heavy industrial or an ugly looking, plant or business there. If you've ever been inside any kind of modern day manufacturing, if that's the type of business that would potentially end up here, we all have to meet IDM requirements, EPA requirements. There are air emissions inventories that we have to comply with. And I would just caution, if there was a business that came in there and they were looking for an exception to the IDM requirements or EPA requirements, that would be something that we wouldn't want to listen to. But for limited industrial, I think that's the right solution. It's a reasonable solution to zone that business. I think it's a good thing, and from a resident perspective, I'm in full support. I do have a question for the Planning Commission. Is your capacity to approve or disapprove this zoning, or do you make a recommendation to someone else?
The Plan Commission, in matters of rezoning, is an advisory body. They make a recommendation that can either be a favorable recommendation, an unfavorable recommendation, or for some reason, a no recommendation. But they make that recommendation to the legislative body, and since this is located in the county, the legislative body is the county commissioners.
Thank you. Any questions for me from any of my capacities? Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Good evening, I'm Tracy Lutton with the Muncie Delaware County Economic Development Alliance. I'm not here representing the property owner, I'm here representing my organization. I'm here to support the property owner's request to rezone this property because I believe that doing so will allow it to serve its best possible use. I think it'll open the door for job creation opportunities for our community, and future capital investment. I also support the limited industrial classification that is being requested. The other 3 corners, as you likely know, of Cowan and Fuson are industrial zoned already, limited industrial and, intense industrial and industrial park. This would be a step back from that. They're asking for limited industrial, and of course, that would restrict any new development types that are not specifically listed in the zoning ordinance, so you can see clearly what would be permissible there. And operations such as livestock processing would absolutely not be permitted there. We do not have any sites in the industrial center that are larger than 100 acres. That is a common site selection criteria, 100 or more acres. We don't have any sites of that size currently available. This site has everything the companies are seeking. Visibility, proximity to the 4-lane bypass, an exceptionally strong utility network, especially since the new ABP substation has recently come online or soon to be. And of course, the tract only has 2 property owners that are very interested in selling and seeing development happen there. So I think I mentioned last time, something that's important to consider is that this property has been in the economic development plan since 2008. But it's shown on the cover of the plan. That plan has been reviewed by the Planning Commission and approved as being in compliance with the Muncie Delaware Comprehensive Plan. So given that previous review and action, that gave us, as an economic development organization, confidence to start working on due diligence to get that site ready for potential development. We have gone to a lot of time and significant expense to go through a site certification program to get that designated as shovel-ready. And that shovel-ready status has brought us a lot of leads and site visits from existing businesses looking to expand, domestic companies, international companies. And in 2020, I went back and looked, we submitted 10 proposals, 10 responses to RFPs for projects 100 acres and more, and this was the site that we put together because it is our best option. So some of these projects are still ongoing in spite of pandemic. And as such, we're required to continue to do due diligence on the site. So it is true that there has been site work underway. Just last week, we did an updated wetlands survey of the site, and then there's been some other work too. So I can also confirm that there is currently an undisclosed manufacturing company that is considering the site for significant investment. According to the information we've been provided, the company's process would certainly fall within limited industrial. We are a finalist. We are a finalist for this project. Zoning is a critical step for us to be able to advance to the next step. We are still competing against other communities, and that is why we are not able to divulge exact details of the project scope. But I think we're here today to talk about appropriate land use, not judge whether a project has merit or not. So I can also add that it is in the packaging manufacturing sector. It is not animal related in any way. And we have already conducted a preliminary environmental review of the project with more to come on that. So to be clear, the types of companies that we are seeking, I know a lot of folks think about the manufacturing of 30 years ago, of 50 years ago, their grandpa's factory experience. That is not what we're working toward here in Delaware County. We are seeking capital intensive projects that are high tech, highly automated, mechanized, that have high level skill training for our workforce and their employees. We're looking to build our workforce, and we're looking for jobs of the future. So this site is in an industrial setting with utilities and transportation networks that are perfectly suited for industrial development. It aligns with the long-term plan for the Planning Commission that has already been reviewed and approved. And so I ask that you will extend a favorable recommendation to the county commissioners for the rezone request. So, thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ashley Savio. I'm the Director of Economic Development for American Electric Power, specifically Indiana, Michigan Power. I'm here this evening to speak in support of the rezoning petition. And my remarks also align with the letter that I submitted to Ms. Moody last week. Our company has been a proponent of economic development and responsible community and economic development for over 20 years. That result in quality jobs and capital investment contributing to the tax base. In 2014 and 2015, Indiana Michigan Power provided technical assistance to bring this site in the industrial center up to shovel-ready status, meaning many site studies were performed and a third-party consulting firm verified the attributes of the site, made it suitable for general industrial use. It was during the third-party evaluation that the Executive Director of the Planning Commission submitted a letter on January 9th, 2014, stating that the rezoning of the land to industrial or business park use would conform with the comprehensive development plan for the area. And it has been marketed accordingly since, as Ms. Lutton stated. This corner of the industrial center has been very attractive. In my role, I worked across ADP's eastern footprint, working to attract new businesses to our service area. As Tracy mentioned, it has received a lot of attention in the last few years. There are very few sites like this. We do have quite substantial electric infrastructure in the area and are in the process of energizing our new fusion station. That station has been in the works since approximately 2014, prior to any of the recent conversations and this rezoning. And the purpose of that is to re-energize the former station at the Delco site that will serve the existing customers in the area as well as support new customers with reliable and available capacity. So I reiterate that we are in full support of the rezoning here. We support the Economic Development Alliance as well as the County Economic Development staff and all the great work that they have done to bring responsible and quality jobs to the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have a letter that I received from Mr. Bradley Bookout, and that he asked that I read for the commission. And it states, for tonight's hearing, I'd like to share that the Delaware County Redevelopment Commission has a place in process by which industrial prospects who are requesting incentives are required to submit responses to a template environmental questionnaire. Depending on the responses submitted, the DCRC, the Delaware County Redevelopment Commission, then will decide to contract with an environmental consulting firm to advise and provide oversight as to the company's activities and processes. Compliance with the county's oversight is mandatory in order to receive incentive assistance. This process was put into place in response to concerns over new companies coming to the community that potentially could endanger human health. The county oversight through a third-party environmental consulting firm has greatly helped the county to understand the processes that will actually be happening at facilities and enables the county to take action if a project is not in compliance with local expectations or endangers human health. Any project that locates on the property being considered for rezoning at tonight's hearing and who requests local assistance will be subject to this oversight. And that is, as I stated, from Mr. Bookout.
Very good. Anyone else to speak in favor? Okay, those opposed? If we can, I know everybody has kept their comments to 3 to 5 minutes. Let's try to do that.
Good evening. We are Jody and Jerry Thomas. We stood with comments during the last meeting there, and we were here. We have been residents of South Wind Village for nearly 28 years. I'll get my act together here in a minute. I reiterate that we are probably the residents who have lived in the addition the longest. Since attending the first meeting about this rezoning appeal, we have had time to think even more about why we hope this will be voted down. First, we would like to address an event that happened in our neighborhood on Tuesday afternoon on March 16th, 2021, which is a prime example, it's an example of why we oppose this rezoning. Jerry will tell you about this.
Yeah, we've been kind of burned, because on this date, on March 16th, I had some errands to run, and when I left our home, I noticed a very strong sulfur smell. Having worked at Delco Battery Plant for 32 years, I knew immediately what that smell was. It was a sulfuric acid smell. This was the smell of the same ingredient found in battery acid, and I knew where it came from. So I called the police. I didn't call 911, I just called the police, and they sent a fire truck out. Upon arrival, they told my wife that they would investigate the smell. They went over to Element Resource, formerly Exide, and as they got closer, they could smell the battery plant odors that were coming out of their smokestack. There is supposed to be equipment to stop those odors from spewing out. The firemen returned to our house and said they were going to check further on this. Well, this has been an issue for a long time. This was a clear indication of why we do not want to have any more limited light industrial factories in our area. These people snuck through. Now, how they did that, I don't know. But it's just that, I would hate to be north of that plant, because we're south of the plant, and normally the fumes blow the other direction. So, and I know that place is a problem. And what they do is they find them when they find that they haven't thrown a switch or something, they haven't turned something on, and we complain about it, and they go over there and they find it, and they find them. And I'm sure you all know about it.
Next, I have a few thought-provoking questions to ask the committee. Do any of you live in this area being addressed for rezoning? Do you have any personal investment as the residents living in all of the neighboring additions? Does it matter to you if an industry limited light, or however you want to define it, becomes part of the industrial complex? Will it personally have a possible effect on your property value? Will this decision be based on money or politics, for heaven's sake? Can you promise us that no business will ever spew out some unpleasant smell into our neighborhood environment like Element Resource once called Exide? Can you give us absolute, and I like that word, as a teacher for 40 years and with children, working with children in the public schools, can you give us an absolute assurance that no procedures or stipulations will be changed if the rezoning is not appealed? Probably each one of you can only say that you know what you are proposing tonight for the present, not the future. We all know that Muncie and Delaware County needs jobs, whether manufacturing or otherwise, but we don't need industries that threaten the environment or endanger people's lives. And that's always a possibility, and doggone it, I know that sometimes things get passed, and then after it's passed, then they have their way. I want that assurance that it's not gonna happen. Having talked with some neighbors, I've come to know that the closer they live to Fuson Road, the worse the smells, the louder the factory noise, and some said that they wouldn't even put out a garden or edible plants in a pot because they don't taste right. I was told that by a neighbor lady. We have noticed that the field has a lot of flags in the ground right now down there, that field that they're thinking about rezoning, indicating that some kind of activity of interest in the land is already taking place. Before it's even voted on, it's taking place. So we were wondering if decisions have already been made before this vote, and our time here tonight is for naught. I certainly hope not, and we certainly hope not, all of us that are sitting here. At the last meeting, an excellent statement was made that this Callan Road exit off of the Muncie bypass gives each person coming into Muncie a beautiful countryside view and a first impression of our city before crossing over Fuson on Callan Road into the industrial complex. Here would be a good place for a welcome to Muncie. Change may be inevitable. I understand that. But change is not always beneficial. I make one last plea to the voters of this committee on behalf of the people sitting here tonight, those who are opposed to this, that this farmland will remain just that, farmland. Thank you very much for hearing us out. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mike Downham. I live at 5005 South Montego Way in South Wind Village. Been there for about 12 years now. And as you can imagine, I'm here to oppose this rezoning proposal. I'm not opposed to economic development. I've worked in banking now for 50 years. I understand economic development. I understand how important it is to a community. I also understand that you need to weigh or balance economic development with environmental concerns and green space. This zoning of this property is not necessary. It certainly will do nothing to improve the appearance of our county, and it certainly won't do anything for our green space to trade green space for concrete. Our existing industrial park has plenty of spaces available for development. Last time I checked, there was over 10 spots in that park available for development. The argument has been that businesses are looking for larger plots of ground. Well, I think the facts dispute that. Most, if not all, of the developments in the industrial park right now are not on large spaces of ground. And in addition to that, why would the county have spent millions of dollars invested into a shell building that only sits on 34 acres, if that was true, if they were all looking for large plots of ground? But let's assume for a minute that they are looking for large plots of ground. Well, those are available already in our industrial park. For example, just east of Magnum Plant is 80 acres, zoned industrial, and ready to be developed. Interestingly, the chamber, a few years ago, had that plot of ground approved for food processing. And we were told when that was brought up last month that food processing was not being considered for this piece of ground. But if you look at the businesses that are permitted in a limited industrial zone, there are 31 different types of businesses. 2 of them mention food processing. So there's no assurance that food processing or something like that would not become a reality. Verbal promises are easily broken. Promises need to be in writing and enforceable. That's simply good business for anybody. Pardon my pun, but there's something about this deal that just smells. Let's turn our attention now, and I hate to beat up on our beloved battery plant, but I'm going to. Let's turn our attention for a moment to that plant. I understand we're not here tonight to debate the pros and cons of that battery plant, mostly cons. But it does enter into why we are here tonight and why the people of Southwind Village, Parkshire Place, Breezewood, and other areas are skeptical of this rezoning. I'm sure that when that battery plant was proposed, all the assurances in the world were made. Well, somebody certainly dropped the ball on that deal. I find it ironic that we're all sitting here tonight with masks on, socially distancing, and doing all the things that we should be doing to stop a deadly virus, while at the same time we approved and we continue to approve a plant that is expelling over 240,000 pounds of toxic chemicals into our air, our land, and our water. Sulfuric acid, arsenic, and lead, to be, for example. I think you can understand why the people here tonight are a little bit skeptical of this rezoning. I believe that the people of Southwood Village, Parkshire Place, Breezewood, other areas around there, we certainly have paid our fair share of dues for economic development. Now, I realize that this rezoning is for light industry, but the problem with that is that puts it just one step closer to being approved for heavier industry, and then all of a sudden we have something like the battery plant, and that's no good. My wife and I have 12 children, 20 grandchildren, 21 shortly, and they visit us regularly. And we would hope that we would provide, with your help, a safe environment for them to be at. In the final analysis, I want you to think about this. If this rezoning was in your backyard, are you satisfied that all the concerns have been taken care of? And that all those concerns have been satisfied without a reasonable doubt? If you can't answer yes to that question, then you've got to vote no on this proposal. At the very minimum, if approved, and certainly the very minimum, this rezoning should include enforceable restrictions that would be against businesses like food processing or similar type of operations. And by the way, AEP, American Electric Power, has this property listed on their website, and they say the rezoning is forthcoming. Interesting. I would hope that you will do what's right and do the right thing and not allow AEP or others to make your decisions for you. Thank you.
Good.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Robin Keeler. I live at 5304 South Breezewood. I've lived there over 35 years. And my understanding of zoning is to segregate uses that are thought to be incompatible. And one of the principles of zoning is to ensure the health, safety, and general welfare of its people. If manufacturing is moving in, how will you be ensuring our health? Relying on items doesn't work. They pay their fines, they conduct business as usual. At the March 4th hearing, it was mentioned that under limited industrial, this would be an enclosed structure. I found in the Delaware County zoning ordinance for limited industrial zone, section 8, part F, titled emissions, that there could be particulate matter, noxious and toxic gases. I care about the quality of my air, water, and soil. I have a well for water. We already live with some pollution, but how much is enough? There's a plan for the land, but is there a plan for the people? I would like to see our air, water, and soil tested on a regular basis before the industrial center expands across Houston and the bypass. At the previous meeting, I've noticed the reasons given for rezoning. One of them was the pastor mentioned 3 times he wanted to rezone to utilize funds for his ministry or income. And I can't appreciate that. But is that an appropriate reason to rezone? My understanding of rezoning is about the betterment of the community. It was also mentioned that rezoning that farm land would conform it to the 3 adjacent corners that are intense industrial. But that farm property already conforms with the field beside it and the residential homes. I was happy to see powertrain move into ABD. That's what I'd like to see more of. We have too many brownfields, empty lots to be turning valuable farmland into another possible future brownfield. Please fill in our empty lots around the city and county first. Let's stop the county sprawl before it starts.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have a question. My understanding is there's supposed to be signs posted on the property when it's up for rezoning, and I was told there was one on a tree by a barn, and I never saw any signs. Is that something that's supposed to be there?
We have neon orange signs that are to be posted on the property.
Are they supposed to be posted where you could see as you drive by?
We tell people that they should be visible from the road. There's no specifics about exactly where you put it, but that it should be visible from the road.
Because I never saw one, and I looked for one.
Yeah.
So that's basically my thoughts, and I have also called the fire department in the past year or 2 for sulfur. And we just we don't trust them. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak opposing the rezoning?
My name is Donnie Garrett, and I'm here with my wife. We're property owners in Southwind Village Addition. I've lived there for going on 22 years now. And I too have grave concerns about this. First of all, I have not seen any signs, as the lady mentioned. That's a new one on me. And second of all, I've worked in manufacturing for 30 years. I'm retired from General Motors, and I know how this stuff evolves. I've worked in the battery plants, I've worked in transmission plants, and the truck assembly plants. So I've pretty much done the whole gamut. So I'm quite familiar with an industrial environment, and I know probably a lot more about it than just the average person walking down the street, because that's how I made my living, working in that environment. I have one question right off the bat. The property that's in question here about rezoning, does that property extend all the way west to the edge of Southwind Village subdivision?
No,
No.
No.
Okay, so that tract of land has not been, no rezoning's been requested on that section?
correct,
Okay.
correct. Although, just so you know, the north part of that field along Fusion Road is in a limited business zone, and the south part of it is in an R5 residence zone, and that's been in effect for over 20 years. It's just not been developed in that way, it's been farmed.
Okay. Well, I mean, you have to understand our concerns as property owners here. We have to be concerned about the value of our properties depreciating immediately. And a lot of us, you know, we have considerable investments in our homes and our properties. And the wrong moves here can greatly affect our property values. Second of all, we have to be concerned about noise too. It's bad enough now, I mean, from the forge plant that's up the street there, sometimes we can hear those hammers at night. And, I understand that it's an industrial zone, but it seems kind of funny to me that there's a shell building been built there, going on 3 years ago, and the thing still sits empty. Why is that not taken into consideration here instead of trying to bite off more ground and rezone it? I'm for progress, but I'm also concerned about the value of our properties and what impact that it would have on that. And I just wanna go on record that I'm not in favor of it, so I just want you to know that.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Oh, hello, my name's Jay Turner, and while I do not live directly in one of the affected neighborhoods, I live a couple miles south. I really have a lot of concern for my friends and neighbors that are going to be right there, and have asked the same questions, including, there is so much of the land that's there already, undeveloped, the shell building that everyone has mentioned, sitting there vacant, and yet you're wanting to expand all of this, further encroaching into people's homes and their neighborhoods, which I don't feel is necessary. I don't think it's in the best interest of our community and our area and our friends and our neighbors. So, that's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello. Sorry I'm late, but I don't know.
I'm sorry, but we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Not real well.
I guess it's not working. Anyway.
Could you state your name and address, please?
I'm Judy Jones. I live at 3400 West Fleetwood Drive. And I'm right next to what I call the rich neighborhood. But we all have the same amount of money. Anyway, I've lived in my house for 23 years. And I don't see, when they got an empty, like the guy said before me, when they have an empty building down the road, why don't they use it? If they're gonna do something. If they're gonna, why build another building when they don't need to? It's just not worth, my estimation, it's not worth anything. Why build another building if you got a building out there that's sitting empty? Why not use it? If you're gonna use it for something. Why did they build it to start with if they wasn't gonna use it? You get what I'm saying? Because if you're not gonna use what you're building, why did you build it to start with? So if you're gonna if you're gonna use something, why build it out there in an empty plot by our neighborhood when it's not necessary, when you got a building down the road that's sitting empty and is up for sale? things in life don't mean a whole lot of sense to a lot of people. And I, for one, you know, it doesn't make sense to me, as old as I am, to see an empty building sitting there when you're wanting to build something else. Why not use what's vacant, that's been sitting there for at least 2 or 3 years empty, if not longer? Why not use it instead of building something else on people's other, you know, like in our neighborhood, and depreciating our neighborhood? We try to keep our homes up, you know, to specifications, I'm sorry. And, to make a long story short, you know, why not use the buildings that you have out there for this industrial whatever? Why take up people's property to build something else when you don't need to? It's wasting money in my books. I don't know about anybody else's books, but if you got an empty building, why not use it for whatever you wanted to use it for? Why build more out there when you don't need to? Am I not right?
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi there, my name is David R. Smith, and I live at 5113 South Jamaica Drive, there in South Wind Edition. I actually had no intentions of speaking tonight. I kind of wanted to sit this one out, but the more I've sat here and thought about it, I kind of had a change of heart. So I haven't prepared anything. I'm just kind of speaking from the heart. I'm a little anxious. I actually taught public speaking at Ball State, so I shouldn't be anxious, but I'm anxious because this is an issue that's really, really close to my heart, and I want to explain why. Right now I live in South Wind Edition, but I also grew up at the farm there at the corner of Callan and 67. If you guys are aware of that corner, if this zoning takes place, my family's 50 acres, that will be the last corner of those 2 major intersections that will not be zoned for industrial. That's the farm that I grew up on. My mother lives there in one house up by the road. My grandmother lives back along one of the long lanes, and then my aunt lives up the other lane. So growing up, that's where I played. That's where I played in the pond. You see the old antique barn from the highway. That's where I kept all my animals growing up. And it was a wonderful, wonderful place to grow up. It was right out in the country. It was wonderful. I went to Cowan all 13 years. I didn't have Mrs. Thomas as my teacher, but I knew her quite well. And I actually ended up graduating valedictorian. And the reason I bring that up is I'm actually a family friend of Mr. Cleland, who is the large landowner of the land that's being rezoned. Again, kind of a total coincidence. And the reason I bring up high school is I actually job shadowed Mr. Cleland my senior year of high school, which was an amazing experience. He taught me so much about business and economics, and I was super delighted to go to school and tell everybody that on my experience, I got to fly on his private jet, which was just absolutely amazing. So, you know, I really respect Mr. Cleland. Another coincidence is my mother actually almost purchased the land that Mr. Cleland owns. She was actually the one that brokered the deal to him when she decided she didn't want it. She told him about it because he had the factory nearby, and that's why he chose to buy it, so he could build the barn where he stores his stuff. And so I feel very invested in this because I live in the neighborhood next to this property, and then if this property is zoned and something is built there, it's going to affect my entire family. Especially my 84-year-old grandmother. She likes to sit on her front porch, and depending on what is built on this property is what she's gonna see. And so, as Mr. Downham said earlier, you know, pardon my pun, but this really smells, it really stinks, because here I am invested with my family, and this could impact our land and our properties, but I also am a personal friend of the landowner. So it's kind of one of those situations, but knowing that perspective, and there's one other strange coincidence, is I was chronically ill for 14 years. The tragedy with my life is, like I said, I graduated valedictorian, got a full-ride academic scholarship to college, was tearing it up in business school, and I actually came home extremely sick. I was chronically ill for 14 years. My family spent an absolute fortune trying to diagnose me. We couldn't figure out what was wrong. I spent 2 of those years practically bedridden, and I thought my life was over. Through my own research, I learned that I actually had something, I had a chronic illness that was a chronic inflammatory response syndrome, and I had brain scans that show I had brain damage, and it was caused by exposure to environmental toxins. Unfortunately, I lived in the moldy basement of my dorms my last 2 years of college, and so it heavily impacted my life. And the reason I share that with you all is I fully understand the concern of environmental toxins and how they can destroy a person's health and ultimately destroy a person's life. I've been on the Dr. Shoemaker detox protocol for 3 years now. My health is recovered, and I'm now working a full-time job in marketing and using the master's degree that I earned through Ball State University. It took me several years to earn that master's degree because I was chronically ill, and they were very accommodating to me, knowing that it took me a lot longer than it should have, but I did the best I could. So I tell you all that just because I feel like the overall theme of what I want to point out is there's such a mistrust here between residents that live in this area and our elected officials. Again, because I'm friends with the landowner, and then I have family that's so invested in this area, all we want is transparency. If we could just know as residents what's going to go in here and how it's going to affect our lives and what type of things we're going to have to look at. And then as someone who's had health problems from environmental toxins, you know, what if? You know, we're scared. We don't know what's going to go in there. We don't know how that's going to impact our lives. So I guess the reason I'm standing up here is I just wish that we had more transparency. I think I'm speaking for all of us from the neighborhoods that are up here. We respect that you have to have confidentiality. We respect that, but it's just, we're so scared. We don't know what's going to go in there. We're trusting you. And we've made it very clear that in the past, that trust has been violated and broken because Exide was bad enough, but it almost happened 2 or 3 years ago again. Like, how does that happen again?
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm heartbroken. And I stand up here, I've lost sleep over this. I've been anxious over this. I don't know what the outcome of this is gonna be. I just wish that we had more transparency that would ease my anxiety of me knowing what's gonna happen and what's gonna go in there. I know for me, you know, I'm kind of the advisor, or I am the male of the family, and so, you know, we're gonna have to make some tough decisions. You know, if a factory goes in there across from my family's farm, my mother, my aunt, my grandmother, we're gonna have to make some really tough decisions. We don't wanna live by a factory. We don't wanna live near, you know, a potentially dirty factory. And so, you know, I wish something could go in there that could bring economic jobs and development to the community, but what would that look like? And, you know, it's just, I'm all for jobs, I'm all for economic growth, but I'm also not for something that's gonna harm our health. And also, I've got stake in property values. I live in Southwind Addition, and then my family owns that 50-acre corner that essentially is gonna be the last undeveloped corner in this area. So again, I had no intention of speaking tonight, but I thought, you know, my story's a little unique, and that I'm kind of caught in crossfires here with all of this. And so, you know, it is what it is. And so I apologize for taking so much of your time, but I appreciate you guys hearing me out. And again, the whole purpose of what I said is, I just wish there was more transparency. I just wish we knew what was going on so we could, you know, talk this out and hopefully compromise and come up with a good solution. So, again, David Smith in Southwind Addition. Thank
Sir,
you guys.
where did you say your family farm was?
It's at the intersection of 67 and Cowan Road. There's
Which-
approximately
which
50 acres there.
Which corner?
What's that?
Which corner?
It would be,
Southwest.
southwest. And one thing I'll add in there, you know, my family, we've always taken great pride in the way we keep up that corner. You know, we try to keep the yard immaculate. We actually mow and maintain all of that ditch line in front of the house. And the reason we've done that is we're kind of the gateway to Cowan. And, you know, many people have talked about their concerns about, you know, just, you know, if you're driving through Muncie off of 67, you have a choice to either go one way into downtown Muncie and Ivy Tech, or you can go the other way out into the Cowan area. And so my family is really the first property you see right there. So we've always maintained that ditch line and, you know, maintained our trees and really tried to make our community look good. And that's what's so heartbreaking, because there's now a point in time where like I said, we might have to make some tough decisions where it might be time to leave. The other thing is, speaking of the industrial park, my family's owned a business here in Muncie for going on 61 years, and it's located within the industrial park. So I feel like I understand there's a place for business, and then there's also a place for living out in the country. So I just want to bring that up as well. But yeah, are you familiar with where we live now?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, awesome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you guys, I appreciate your time.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Mr. President, I do want to report on materials that we received in the office. And you have some of them in front of you in the form of some letters in opposition and concern. One of them was from Mr. Smith, who just spoke. And then also I wanted to let you know that we have taken 22 calls, a couple of them from people who have spoken, but all of them were in opposition, and a summary of their comments deals with keeping the farm ground, that they moved there for the peace and quiet. They don't need more industrial in the area. They should use existing sites, and health and environmental concerns for the area. So, very similar to what we have heard this evening. The other thing that you have, not everyone has a copy of this, but we have copies of a petition for you to share amongst yourselves that includes 51 signatures, and then about 150 I guess, internet signatures that are actually from all over in opposition to a Facebook post dealing with opposition to the rezoning at that area. So those are additional materials that I wanted to put on the record.
I have one from Daytona Beach.
I know they're from all over.
Yeah, okay. All right, anyone else? I'm sorry?
Can I say something?
Have you spoke yet?
Yeah.
Okay. No, we'll move on. Is anyone else that hasn't spoke want to speak? Okay, we want to vote on MPC 01-21Z first, correct?
Yes.
Mr. President, or Marta, would you please take the time and explain to these good folks, they've come out this evening, explain to them the process, you know, as far as voting yes or no and how it goes. And I want people to understand that none of us up here are elected officials. None of us are elected to these positions that we hold. We are not elected politicians. No one sitting up here is elected.
Well,
there's
two
Couple of them.
people that are required to be, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but the rest of us, I mean, I didn't run for an office. I'm not paid to sit here. I do not receive any kind of money whatsoever. I want everybody to understand that. And then I'd like for these good folks to explain the process of what's gonna happen and what's gonna take place here.
Yes. So, as I had mentioned earlier, the Plan Commission, this body is an advisory body to the legislative body. And this commission makes a recommendation. That recommendation, typically motions are made in the positive to try to keep everybody on the same page when they do vote. So a motion is made to approve, and then the end result of that vote, it requires 5 votes in favor to get a favorable recommendation. If there are not 5 votes in favor, but there are 5 votes against, then that is forwarded as an unfavorable recommendation. And in a very rare circumstance, as I mentioned earlier, there could be a no recommendation on the part of the commission if they can't really reach a majority action. So then after the plan commission takes action, the application is forwarded to the county commissioners for final action. And that would be, if the commission takes action this evening, then this matter would be forwarded to the county commissioners for their April 19th regular meeting, which occurs in this room at 9 o'clock in the morning, just making sure they were still meeting in person. So, in this room at 9 o'clock in the morning, and at that time, they take final action on the rezoning. So.
Okay. Mr. Jesse, that was good?
Yeah.
Is that what you want?
Yes.
All right, I would entertain a motion for a favorable recommendation on MPC 01-21Z.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Carey?
No.
Mr. Dishman?
No.
Mr. Hall?
No.
Mrs. Hensley?
Yes.
Mr. Landis?
No.
Mr. Matzenbacher?
Yes.
Ms. Sipe?
Yes.
Mr. Wisely?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
That is 5 yes and 4 no. That is official action, and that is a favorable recommendation by that 5-4 vote that will be forwarded to the county commissioners for their regularly scheduled meeting on April 19th to begin at 9 o'clock in the morning in this room.
Okay, MPC 02-21Z. I'll entertain a favorable recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dishman? Mr. Hall?
No.
Mrs. Hensley?
Yes.
Mr. Landis?
No.
Mr. Matzenbacher?
Yes.
Mrs. Sipe?
Yes.
Mr. Wisely?
Yes.
Ms. Carey?
No.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
That is 5 yes, 4 no, and that is, once again, official action with a favorable recommendation that will be forwarded to the commissioners for their meeting on April 19th, beginning at 9 o'clock in the morning in this room at that time. That's a Monday morning, by the way.
Okay, we'll move on to new business. You wanna,
What we might do is allow a transition here,
okay,
because we have people waiting for this this last item on the agenda. And so if we could have a little bit of a break and allow the people that were here for the rezonings to move out and let the new people come in.
motion to recess for 5 minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're in recess.
Because we've had them waiting. Hey, Brent,
Oh,
for
there-
the rest
there
of
you
you
go.
that
One of them I
do
saw
all this,
down-
you'll need
downstairs,
to,
who I know
like,
is,
keep a copy of this and
who,
go file.
Cardinal Alcohol.
Okay.
So he's here. I didn't realize he owned land in Delaware County. He owns about half of Randolph County.
Okay, okay.
Other than him, I'm not sure. I'm sure there are people here who complain about how, the power went out.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. This is I know we have a new group of people, it looks like. So this is the Delaware-Muncie Metropolitan Plan Commission, our April, regular meeting in April 2021. So we will go ahead and restart the meeting. Marta, under new business, MPC 04-21A.
Yes, jurisdiction, county commissioners, being a consideration of a resolution of approval to amend the text of the Delaware County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance regarding large solar installations. And what the members received in their packets is a copy of the proposed text amendment, and it is written so that it applies to solar farms in the F farming zone only. And it includes some general regulations dealing with the concept plan, the overall overview plan that's required, site plans that will be required that will show detail. It deals with height limitation of no more than 20 feet. It deals with setbacks, signage, buffering, fencing, ground cover, lighting, glare, noise, driveway access, concurrent uses, which means that the solar farm can actually, should a property owner desire, can coincide with agricultural uses, whether that is row crops or animal agriculture. That's between the property owner and any solar company that might be involved. It includes some provisions on power lines and then some definitions. And the general definition of a solar farm is a group of interconnected solar panels arrays for the primary purpose of wholesale or retail sales of generated electricity, including all equipment and facilities necessary for the proper operation of the facility, such as electrical collection and transmission lines, transformers, substations, energy storage containers, and operations or maintenance facilities. That is an augmented definition after we had received some input from the original definition that we had, which was very general, just saying an array of solar collectors on ground-mounted poles that transmit solar energy. So what I just read is the improved definition of a solar farm. And one thing I should explain is that there are lots of people who for their own use and on their own property, they have put in solar facilities. This does not regulate that type of use. This is for use that, where the electricity is intended to be sold for, as stated, wholesale or retail use. And so it does not, like I say, deal with individual solar installations that power uses that are on the property. With those types of solar installations, those are considered accessory uses. The ordinance has been on our website, and we have also gone through some proposed amendments, and the Plan Commission members received most of those as a supplement to their packets. And then there was an additional revision for dealing with just a few items. And then based upon input that has been received from a couple of different solar providers, there are some additional things they are asking for the commission to consider. And those are as stated in the revisions and that you have in front of you. Certain revisions I am recommending, and those are the ones that deal with for the most part, being a little bit more specific about how and when and where the regulations will occur. For example, in the decommissioning plan section, it talks about that there shall be removal of the facilities for up to a depth of 4 feet, and that also the decommissioning removal of facilities shall be completed within a 12-month period. So the revisions deal with some additional specifications to make the provisions clearer to all. And the purpose of this meeting is to get additional input. There may be additional provisions that people might want, or changes that they might want. And so the purpose of this meeting is to hear those comments, and in favor or against, or just concerns, like things you would like to see changed. And the Plan Commission can take action on those different changes this evening, or they could continue it in order for changes to be totally incorporated into the amendment, or well, as I said, they could go ahead and take action on the text amendment along with the proposed revisions that have been presented, and then it is forwarded to the county commissioners for final action. The idea, since this is a text amendment, in theory, what that means is the Plan Commission is favorably recommending this change to the legislative body. So, what we need to do here is work through this to see if you have any concerns, and see if there are ways that concerns can be addressed in order for the Plan Commission to forward a favorable recommendation, ideally, because, like I say, it's a text amendment process to the zoning ordinance, which is the basis for what the Plan Commission deals with. So, and what we might do is go ahead and get any input from people that might want to speak, and then we can take any questions and go from there, I guess.
Okay, who would like to speak in reference to this resolution?
Anybody in favor?
Anyone in favor of this?
Anybody against?
Is anyone opposed to it? Okay, well, that solves that problem.
Okay.
Would you like to speak?
I could.
Yeah.
Over here.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
My name is Joe Russell. I live at 3501 East County Road 700 North, Eaton, Indiana. I'm a farmer. And having been a farmer for 190 years since we settled this country, I mean, farmers have been in the solar business from day one. We capture sunlight and we convert it into something that's useful to mankind, food, fiber, whatever. So that hasn't changed. The one thing farmers do, the market sends us signals, and it tells us what to produce, whether it's a restaurant, a grocery store, or fiber. So recently, there's been a move away from fossil fuel. The public likes green, new energy, and solar is one of those. So we, as farmers, we can read that signal and go, okay, there's an opportunity to do that. It takes a lot of land to capture the solar energy to condense it into useful form. So that's why probably agriculture is pretty interested in this. Now, having read the first proposal language, my only concern was the amount of the setbacks in that. of 65, 50, and 250 feet in it. If we had, as farmers, we hate to waste, we hate to have land out of production. Well, if we had, let's say 4,000 acres of solar farms, 20% is in set aside, that's 800 acres a year that's not producing food, fiber, or electricity. Times 30 years would be 24,000 acres that's out of production. So any reduction in the setbacks, I think would be wise. In the comments I read on the revision from staff, those are reduced mostly to 50 feet, but could use screening and whatever. Well, I would highly recommend the lesser setbacks being more better use of our resources in this county. I mean, we could take this, we could build 5 solar farms with big setbacks, or you could build 4 solar farms with lesser setback and generate the same electricity, and that would keep a whole nother solar land, several hundreds of thousand acres in production. So I really like the suggestion to reduce the amount of setbacks. That was my main concern on that. I'm very supportive of the amendments that were included on the internet anyway. And I used to be on county council. Solar farms are one of the few things that a county can attract that they don't really pollute, they don't emit, smokestacks and emissions. They're quiet, they're just, it's basically a big organic farm. And it generates a lot of tax money for the county entities. I mean, you're not building schools to educate people that are attracted, you're not using roads. I mean, the main thing the county's gonna have to do is cash a check a couple times a year. That's so rare to come on projects like that. So I hope we aggressively go after some of these solar projects as a kind of the project we've been waiting for. We've certainly turned some projects down, but well, I'm just saying this is one of the good ones. It's good for agriculture, it's good for the community, it's good for government. So I'd be very supportive, especially with the suggestions of the staff. And I can answer any questions. I can try to answer any questions you might have. I think it's a great idea. The time has come.
So you think the 50-foot setback is sufficient?
I do. I know it says 20-foot height maximum. Most of these are like 9 or 10 feet tall, the same as a cornfield. But 50 feet I think would be sufficient. It allows room to maintain the buffer, the fences on the inside on the solar panel side. 50 feet gives you room to maintain that project, a little buffer. If people want some trees or vegetative buffer, so be it. That's a good idea. Some people maybe don't want it. Okay? And the second proposed language says, gives those adjoining land or dwellings the right to have it or not. I think that's a good idea. Some people maybe don't want to look at trees, but prefer seeing the openness in the solar farm. So I think 50 would work most places. Now, when the solar integrator comes, they may have ideas of their own. If we say 50 and they want to make it 75, so be it. Or they might have 50 in a lot of places, but allow a couple hundred feet on a dwelling. I mean, that's kind of their call. I guess one concern I had, we talk about burying the internal lines, the electric lines. Being a farmer, I guess, I'd like to see them above the tile, not rip through all the tile to bury the lines. A little above the tile, but deep enough to be protected and safe from the public. So we don't address that in here. And I don't think I put numbers on it because all tile are different depths. But that is a consideration because after 30 years, it'll go back into production maybe. And they may want to recover the lines or farm through them. I'm just saying you might. I don't know what other ordinances might say on that.
Yeah, I have seen some that have specified a depth But what I could do is put a provision there that states that, that all, power lines that are buried underground, that they shall not, interfere with, underground tiles, drainage tiles, without, I don't know how I'll word it exactly, but the idea is that they cannot mess with those, that they have to remain intact. If they bust one, they have to fix it.
But we've been putting tile in for 100 years.
Yeah.
And I'll guarantee you, the people that put them in by hand with a shovel, they're not as deep as what the machine.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have quite a variance on the depth, but
Right.
I guess a mention of it might just show some consideration for it.
Yeah.
After 30 years, I really like the language about, using cover crops, grasses, perennials. I mean, if we had several of these, we might be the honey capital of Indiana.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very, very friendly to bees and butterflies. And my prediction is that if one of these is in a solar farm for 30 years, the land's gonna be better coming out of that than going into it. Just because it's been resting, it's been, you know, there's a lot of talk about soil health and cover crops. This is, wow, the ultimate way to treat your land. You pull the post out, remove the panels, and it's farmable again. So it's, I think that's why most farmers are supporting it. And I guess one question you might have would be, why would we take good productive farm ground out of production for electricity? And most people don't know today that most of our corn goes to ethanol in the county, 60,000 acres. Well, of that 60,000 acres, 20,000 is solely dedicated to ethanol, which is transportation. And maybe you've seen the ads from Ford and GM that we're gonna have our fleet by 2035 all electric. I've yet to see an ethanol tank on an electric car. So I think it's kind of wise to look now, okay, if we have these dedicated acres today for transportation, and make that transition from liquid fuel to electricity or electrons, that's wise. I mean, in the 1990, had we had a warning like that we might lose all of our manufacturing in Delaware County, that would have been nice, because we could have been prepared for it. This language prepares us for that transition down the road, away from ethanol to the next source. And in 30 years, when there's 2 billion more people, we may need that farm ground to produce food again. Right now, we're able to produce more food than is really needed. That's why we're in the ethanol business. So I know that's gonna be one of the arguments. Why take good farm ground out of production for electricity, so.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
So, one thing I forgot to mention that was also in the packets and that has been on the website is, we put on our website a survey, dealing with large solar installations, and, in your packet, you, were given the results of that survey information, which basically was favorable to large solar installations. And that there was a question that, that said, large solar installations are ugly and should be screened from public view. And there was general agreement that that's not the case. A majority of the people disagreed with that. So, and there were some other, like I say, that's available on the website. And I had forgotten to mention that. I don't know if there's anybody else that wants to speak. I made note of the proposed revision dealing with the buried tiles.
Would anyone else like to speak? Please state your name and address. We'll get to the podium, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Nikki Jeffers. I'm actually not a resident of Delaware County, but I know many landowners who are. I'm a developer, I'm a project manager. I work for a company called EDP Renewables. And we are currently working on a couple projects in Delaware County, and so this ordinance is such a fantastic thing, and very appreciative of it. I had previously sent in some comments and revisions from our team, and one thing I want to address is that we've been through the construction process. We are a company, we develop, we construct, we own and operate. So these revisions are really kind of requested more for clarity and a little bit of flexibility, because we run into those situations where having some flexibility would be very helpful. And just as far as a little background, when we talk about solar, as a company, we lease the certain area of what's inside the fence. We also pay the farmers for what's outside of the fence, but they have complete freedom to do whatever they want with it. So if they want to continue to farm, they want to throw up a shed, they want to do whatever, that's absolutely fine. First and foremost, our landowners are absolutely number one. I wouldn't be here, our company wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. And so as I see that some of you may have these comments, really there are two things that I really wanted to bring up. And that was, the first one is on page 4, section E, under buffers and landscape, subsection of screening. And it talks about having 3 rows of mature native trees for screening for landowners if a home is across from part of the solar park. And the clarity we're kind of requesting there is how much of this screening is needed. So if we have a home that's directly across the street from part of the solar park, that's maybe 80 acres. Are we talking 3 rows of trees across that entire, side, or maybe just across from, the direct property itself? And again, that kind of goes back to the farmer has the ability to continue to farm that area. So if we put up these multiple rows of trees, they can't do that, and it's kind of a hindrance to them. The other ask is kind of a little bit more wider language on what makes a pollinator habitat, or essentially revising the language to be non-invasive, native, or naturalized species. And that just gives us a little bit more flexibility when it comes down to choosing the type of vegetation that goes within the solar park. We can't choose something that's too high to go underneath the panels, yet we still want to also have that added benefit for the birds, the insects, and other animals that are going to utilize this area. And so if you haven't noticed already, solar is just growing, and we need these seed suppliers to then all of a sudden be able to supply all the seed for us. And so just widening that language a little bit gives us more flexibility to utilize some other plants, just because these vendors are going to be under such constraints. And that's really, the biggest ask that we have. Martha and her team, they did a really great job with this. So I'm absolutely available for any questions at all, but that's really all that I have to say. Thank you.
And I'll point out for the Plan Commission members that on the supplement to the proposed revisions, which is the one-page revision piece, that was based on comments that we received from EDP, from Ms. Jeffers, and for most of her concerns, I'm suggesting some staff recommended changes, and then at the bottom, it mentions the additional requested change to be considered, and that is what she was just talking about, where the term native plantings is used as required. Consider stating non-invasive native or naturalized species that are appropriate to the region. And I think that you also have in front of you a copy of a Natural Resources Conservation Service document that deals with native native and, naturalized plants, and, a note from the staff, and that, comes from one of your staff members who happens to have a master's in landscape architecture. And so she is, concerned about the invasive plantings becoming an issue, and so that's why she had set this up to say native rather than, the other, dealing with naturalized species or, so I'll say that, and, say that one of the issues is that with naturalized plantings, over time, they can become invasive, but, I guess there's no guarantee. If the commission wants to consider a change, I would say we definitely should say non-invasive, native or naturalized, appropriate to the region, because that can make non-invasive and appropriate to the region can make a big difference. Because there are differences even from the north of the state to the south part of the state. For the other additional changes to be considered, that's on the original revision document, where it taught, they also, this came from another solar provider, and they were also asking about the native plantings required, if that could be changed to native or approved naturalized plantings. If you want to change that, I would prefer the invasive, native, or naturalized species that are appropriate to the region. That's a little bit better language than what was first considered. The other proposed change from another solar company is for the landscaping requirements, rather than a triple row of trees, 15 feet on center, require a double row of trees planted alternately, meaning staggered, on approximately 30-foot centers. And so that, they were requesting that. I think that, now that I'm thinking about it, Ms. Jeffers' point about just exactly where those buffers should occur, because the intention is that they would occur to buffer non-participating dwellings. And so if a non-participating dwelling is across the road, then does there have to be the buffer along the road to that? I think that's something that is well worth spending a little time thinking about. I'm not sure exactly what might be recommended, but I think maybe there should be something along the front to buffer a non-participating dwelling across the road unless they waive it, which they're allowed to waive it if they want.
But could we say just in front of the occupied structure?
Right,
or the
yeah,
house?
right.
Instead of, so if they have a very large yard, I would say buffer just in front of the house, basically.
Right, yeah. And the other thing that Lori and I talked about was, that for, when it's beside, the solar farm area, just how far do they have to go with the buffer? Because the idea is to screen their view, and if there are barns and buildings next to the house, that helps provide a screening effect, so you wouldn't have to go that far. But if there's nothing in back of the house but the solar farm, then how far back do you have to go? And we were thinking, well, maybe you could just say a block, the same length as a block, which is 300 feet.
Yeah.
So that it's clear that you don't have to continue on forever, but that, and this is one of those provisions where you have to show a little bit of common sense and flexibility, because we're talking about screening the dwelling, and it's site specific. It all depends on where the dwelling is and what's around it and what's gonna need to be screened, so.
Marta, I have a question for you on the buffer zone and these trees and so forth. Is it stated any place how big these trees are supposed to be when they're planted? Because, you know, I can go down and buy trees from the nursery right now, they're 2 foot tall, and it's gonna take 10 years or so before those trees, you
Yeah.
know, get up high enough. So
Yeah.
is there anything stated that these trees are,
Yeah, we've got 6 feet tall, which is the, height that's used when we're talking about, putting up, buffer zones in the city. With tree plantings, they have to be, at least 6 feet tall. That's what we've got. Also, we've also put a requirement in there that if you have a wooded area that is more than an acre, those can't be removed. But if you're clearing out some trees, like a fence row or whatever, if you clear out trees that are over 12 inches, then you do have to do replacement. Those are the same kinds of provisions that we have in the development standards for industrial and commercial uses in the city. So we used a similar measure for that. The one thing I want to point out in my staff recommended changes was that I went ahead and changed the front setback to 50 feet, because that's what's required in the farm zone for all uses. But I didn't go ahead and automatically change the 100-foot setback from the other boundaries, but like on page 2 under item 8, I said, consider decreasing the setback from 100 feet to 50 feet. I thought I'd leave it up to you whether you wanted to say 50 feet or not, because ordinances vary. But I did add a provision that says that regardless of the setbacks for the structures, that there's a general 100-foot setback from a dwelling, and that if it's a non-participating dwelling, there's a 250-foot setback. But no one that I've talked to, including the 2 solar companies, had a problem with that, So, items to be considered. If you want to change the 100-foot setback to a 50-foot setback,
I would like to do that myself.
is there any comment or, because basically what we'll get to is, I would ask for and recommend that the motion would be to approve the text amendment with all of the staff recommended changes, as well as a recommendation that the setback in item 10, section 10C2 be changed to 50 feet rather than 100 feet, and that a provision be added dealing with buried facilities shall not interfere with existing drainage tiles. And that, let's see. And then you need to decide how you want to deal with the request for the change to the native plantings versus non-invasive native or naturalized species that are appropriate to the region.
Marta, could you tell me why would we not just, necessitate native plantings and require just native plantings as opposed to this naturalized species? Is it
Well-
one way or the other? I mean,
That would be a question for,
is it a matter of costs or?
it's my understanding that yes, it can be cost. That request came from one of our solar providers who's here in the audience and might want to address that. Mr. Hall?
If anybody would. I'm just curious because in reading some of the comments here on naturalized plants, it seems that, native plantings are probably preferred for pollinators and other, other reasons. So I just wanted to know the difference between naturalized and native, and
Okay.
if anybody,
Yes, we have our own extension agent at the podium.
wonderful.
Speak on that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so, I actually also kind of had the same, question, honestly. So there are a lot of naturalized species that we've planted in multiple places, that ultimately become invasive. We plant things in the best of intentions, right, such as burning bush, which is now on the list of invasive and controlled species, and also covers lots of land within even Delaware County. So that is that's one concern that I have in terms of naturalized. Someone else had said it earlier too. Naturalized is like the first step to invasive in some cases, and so that's just something that I would want to be aware of. So going back to your comment, I don't know, that's something that you might approach with caution.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just trying to understand what would be the negative of requiring native species to be planted.
Cost.
To who?
It would be cost to the utility, but it's also gonna be, oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry. We can share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be cost to the utility, but also kind of a supply and demand thing. Again, if there's gonna be a lot of solar parks and the vendors that provide these seeds, that they're gonna be, pretty tight to get everything turned around. The other thing is part of the wording says non-invasive. We at least have enough documentation to know what plants that are not necessarily not native, but they're not invasive either. And the other thing we need to consider is allowing a little bit more flexibility. The last thing we want to do is choose a plant that looks beautiful, but it's gonna be a heck of a, time for the farmer to get rid of it in his field. And he's gotta do extra maintenance, extra spraying, everything like that. So the wording just allows us a little bit more flexibility, and this is language that has been scrutinized across states, and so there is a little bit of background, but I don't necessarily have a background in plant management, so I can't speak to that.
Yeah. And for the record, that was Miss Nikki Jeffers speaking with EDP.
I mean, I would just say supply is a good problem for our local suppliers. If they're not meeting that demand, then perhaps that's a good thing for them in terms of economic development. So if we're thinking ahead here, and if we're gonna require that native species are used, so seeds from native species are gonna have to be utilized in some of these projects, then perhaps that's a good economic development problem for some of our producers. I liked in your initial revisions approved naturalized plantings, so I don't know, I guess naturalized planting seems so vague, and so I'm confused with what the invasive component of naturalized species is versus not, and so are there some approved naturalized species that may be more appropriate than just the blank broad suggestion of naturalized species? I just put that out.
To my not that knowledgeable, I'm the one that used the term approved naturalized plantings, meaning that we would select those that are currently classified as non-invasive. That's why I was saying, actually stating non-invasive native or naturalized species. To me, that was almost saying the same thing.
Yeah.
But the point, I think, that people have made, like Lauren pointed out, that some naturalized species can become invasive, and that was the
Yeah.
concern.
So is there an approval process? Is that just implicit in this, that decisions will be made in regards to species, native or otherwise?
Well, they would make their proposal, and then we would do the research to see what they're being proposed, to make sure that that was considered non-invasive based on current data.
And this is Nikki Jeffers again, EDPR. I just want to add that when selecting this language and the specific plants that can be used, we have to weed out what would be, a pest for the farmers, so that narrows it down a little bit more. What can the seed companies provide? I agree with you, that is great benefit for them. However, as a company, if we are trying to build this project and complete it within a couple years, and that seed vendor doesn't have the, required seed, and now we have to search outward, search further and further, now we are under scrutiny by our permit, by the ordinance that we can't fulfill. So that's why we're just asking for a little bit broader of language. Again, we want the same thing, but again, it's just a little bit broader of language.
And going back to the finding seed, there are, I'm fairly certain, at least 3 native seed companies within 30 to 45 minutes of here, so.
Yeah, we have a major one right in the south part of Muncie, Spence
Yes.
Nursery.
Yes, so in terms of finding seed, I don't know.
Yeah,
Whether you can't find it here, there's like another one within 30 minutes, another one.
and I'm sure EDP is wonderful. I just, if you don't require it,
As part of my job.
cost is always gonna be the deciding factor. And so, if we have seed providers within 40 miles of Delaware County, then would it not behoove us to require native seeds if that's not an issue? I mean, that's just, I guess, my thinking. Because if you don't require it, I'm almost certain they're not gonna go forward with the more expensive native seed. I'm sure there's a demand for it because there's a demand for it. So I'll leave it there, but.
Since this is one of the main points of contention, I guess I'd say, I think before you take action, it would help me in finalizing the amendment if you discuss this and take action on what you prefer to have in there.
Does anyone else have any comments on the plantings?
I had something on the buffers, so I think someone mentioned the buffers being too large, so there are actually equip grants out there as well from the NRCS, so you can probably get funding to help pay for whatever you end up planting in that 50-foot, 100-foot buffer. There's funding to help mitigate that cost, for whatever it ends up being.
Okay.
And Marta, just from an administrative standpoint, for this, for someone who's already in the farming zone to put in one of these, will this require a special use variance?
No,
Okay.
no, it's set up so that it's a permitted use in a farm zone, subject to meeting all of the requirements that are laid out in this section 10 of the proposed amendment.
And it would just be the same way as any other zoning appeal, if for some reason there was one of those standards they couldn't meet?
Correct.
Same way as on the other.
That is
zoning appeal.
correct.
Okay, that was my understanding, I just wanted to make
Yes.
sure.
There, any one of these provisions, if for whatever reason, they can't meet it or don't want to meet it, they can request a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals, which is standard procedure for any development, or developer. They always have that option to go to the board to request a variance.
That was my understanding as well, thank you.
So, but, since we do have revisions, that are being recommended, like I say, I don't know what to do with the native or, naturalized, and I think, because my goal is to end up with a favorable recommendation for the amendment with all of the revisions. I don't want that to be a sticking point that holds things up. So if we could settle that one and then incorporate whatever the board decides.
So you consider this native or naturalized species, correct?
Right. Yeah, because it's two different things.
Right.
Yeah.
So either or.
But the naturalized have to be, and we could say approved, non-invasive, naturalized plantings. And then basically you go to research and, experts to
Once they
figure that out.
provide what they're planning.
Say, and with what I was asking about before, hypothetically, even couldn't this be something where, like, if the market was really short on the native plants and they had to switch to the naturalized plants, then that would be something that they'd get a variance for, correct?
They could request that.
To say if the market was short on that at
Yeah.
that particular moment.
I never
Okay.
guarantee a variance,
Well,
but
no.
they could request it.
That's what I meant, yeah, so they could request a variance.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just concerned with the verbiage here on this, meaning large-scale use of naturalized plants is not recommended, coming from the USDA. And so, I guess the language allows for large-scale use of naturalized plants, so I guess that's my only hang-up. You know.
Well, you could say, I've not really looked at, one thing in the amendment, it refers to having to meet or exceed the requirements in the Purdue checklist on pollinator habitat standards. And in there, they do have specific requirements that give you extra points for native plants. And I don't know, if one of their checklist questions is planned percentage of native species in perimeter and buffer areas, and then if they have 10 to 25% of native species, that's 4 points. 25 to 26 to 50%, 6 points. 51 to 75%, they get 8 points, and then if their native species are greater than 75, they get maximum 10 points. So it's like I suppose there's room to also say that at least a certain percentage has to be native. And JP, that note on the side is from staff, not the US.
Well, I'm taking your staff's, considerations
Right.
into consideration, and.
Yes, yeah.
And just to say, I'm fully supportive of this ordinance, so.
Yeah.
I just want it to be the best possible ordinance for Delaware County.
Right.
And, not to pass the buck to the utilities, but if utilities are gonna do a solar farm anywhere in Delaware County, and the best use of that ground is to plant naturalized species in addition to the, solar panels, and I think we would want them to do that as much as we possibly can, and be very specific in our ordinance. And if it's a percentage, then I think maybe perhaps that might steer in that direction, that we're trying to incentivize or encourage.
Right.
Or require to a certain degree that utilities are gonna plant, native species. Now, I don't know enough to know, but if somebody tells me it comes down to costs, right? And you mentioned naturalized, or native species earlier, and pollinators, so I'm thinking in terms of the ecosystem, and I think there's some real value in there. I just don't, what I'm reading here, naturalized species probably don't cut it, but I could be wrong.
Okay, Joe Russell again. We're not gonna plant it one time and it's not gonna grow for 30 years and we're all gonna be happy. There's winter conditions that plants die. There's different technologies coming on. We're dazzled by what grows above ground. We hardly understand what goes on underneath with roots and microorganisms. And we might want to even address every 3 or 5 years revisiting the cover crops because new technologies could make other plants more beneficial than what's out there. There's a whole lot going on in agriculture with cover crops right now to improve soil health. So there's just all kinds of new information coming out. But also, I know the county has to fill out papers for air pollution. And if we have 4,000 or 5,000 acres that's sequestering carbon, there could be certain plants that improve our overall air quality of the county. I know we fill out forms for that stuff, but it's kind of a moving target to nail down the appropriate cover crops right now because it's always gonna change. And I think with the technology changes so fast in the biological sciences now that, 30 years from now, they might look back what we're recommending and go, what were they thinking? So I think we might want to even put a language in there to revisit this periodically to make sure that the resources are being utilized in the best possibility for not only the utility companies, but the farm landowners, the neighbors. There are just so many unknowns in the biological sciences that down the road, I think we might get a few answers, but what goes on underground it's amazing. I mean, I'd love to farm one of these solar farms that came out of production 30 years from now. I'll be dead and gone, but still. Wow, this could be the best soil ever, if we do it right. And we want to do it right. I think that's important that this committee does it right. But it's hard in one meeting to pinpoint exactly what we need to do because it's a moving target, so.
But I think too, everyone needs to remember a resolution is good for 2 weeks.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, a resolution's good until the next commissioner meeting. So.
And another thing I should say is that the way this process works is the Plan Commission works this all out and makes their recommendation. It goes to the commissioners. It can also be amended at the commissioner level, and if the commissioners do make an additional amendment, then it comes back to the Plan Commission for the Plan Commission to give their blessing to what the commissioners have done. And once the Plan Commission gives their blessing, then it's considered approved. If for some reason the Plan Commission did not give their blessing, then it has to go back to the commissioners for them to reconfirm their actions. So there's a whole process that this can go through that would still maybe allow for some additional amendments. So I'm back to.
Is anyone, you got a recommendation on an amendment for the plantings?
No, I would say probably not right now on the spot. Without maybe doing a little bit of research. But I think if there's time to perhaps amend even this before it goes to the commissioner, then, and if the planning commission here is open to that, I don't know how that would work, Marta.
Well, I have a question for Joe in the corner. Is he still here?
Joe had to leave.
Oh, darn it. But Joe's our attorney. But if the action of the Plan Commission is that the issue of native plantings, that I would take comments for 2 weeks and then finalize the final language, send that out to all the Plan Commission members to get your thumbs up, thumbs down, and then incorporate that into what's sent to the county commissioners.
That'd be great, yeah.
Good
I think
idea.
just a little bit of wordsmithing, honestly.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so you happy with that then?
I'm happy with that.
Mr. President, I want to go ahead and vote in favor of these proposed revisions here, along with what she just made the comment there with these plantings. The proposed revisions and the supplement revisions there that has been noted this evening, including setbacks and all the discussion that we've had with that. That's my motion.
Okay, we have a motion.
I Second.
And a second. Roll call, please.
Carey. Ms. Carey?
Yes.
Mr. Dishman?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Ms. Hensley?
Yes.
Mr. Landis?
Yes.
Mr. Matzenbacher?
Yes.
Ms. Sipe?
Yes.
Mr. Wisely?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
That is 9 yes, 0 no, and that is a favorable recommendation for all of the revisions that have been provided, as well as the additional revisions that we have discussed, and with the understanding that the issue of native plantings will be taken under consideration for the next 2 weeks in order for input to be received and a final language change to be recommended by the Plan Commission and provided to the commissioners for their April 19th meeting.
Very good. Legislative action?
No legislative action on which to report.
Do you have any other information you'd like to share?
Yes, the only other thing I would say is a reminder that our comprehensive plan project remains in the works, and the website that's called Together DM, which stands for Delaware-Muncie, togetherdm.org, is available at any time. It provides information. That is where you can find the current first survey to collect information on what the city and county residents regard as the big things to be considered. It is only one piece of information that will be used as we move through this process. And, but I would urge you to take that survey. It's important. And we had a project management meeting Wednesday. We do that every other week. And I asked them to keep the survey open for an additional week, because they were gonna close it out today, to an additional week, because I'm gonna be at city council on, Monday night for not just our official zone map changes for the city of Muncie, but also, there is I'm not sure what they're calling it, but a resilience resolution dealing with climate action plans that is on the agenda, and so I wanted to be there for that. And I also will be telling city council members and everybody that is in the audience and that watches those city council meetings that they can go and take the survey. So they extended the survey time. So anyway, I think it's really important, and it's also important since I have a room sort of full of farmers. If you would be able to do that, that would be good input from the rural community, because we have a lot of input already from our urban people, but it's just as important to get a balanced set of comments from all components of our population. So, anyway.
Very good.
Yeah, that's it.
Big, anything else?
No, I'm done.
Entertain a motion for recess?
No move.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
You're in
Yeah.
commissioner mode.
I did.
Yeah.